Hello, fellow gamers, and welcome to another episode of The Joy of Mega Base Building. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we are going to build a structure in, one of my favorite places to build in this game, and it's sometimes lovingly referred to as the Puddle. And this structure was inspired by a longtime friend of the community, Gandalf, who is also one of our Thursday streamers. This is a nice area to build in because, as you probably saw, there's a small body of water with moderately safe water. And on the right, we just passed a Brazil nut tree, which is good for fats and parasite-killing mushrooms that also give you energy. We're intentionally picking a nearby location to build on that has a high vantage point that will give our tower the best lookout capabilities. And of course, I'm going to drop the coordinates down below if you'd like to build something similar or identical in the area. This first step is the most important part, as it is finding the right positioning for your initial frame. You want to make sure it's close enough to the edge so that you can have a nice lookout area, but at the same time, you want to make sure you have space on one of the sides to build an additional frame. This spot looks pretty good, and while initially it may appear that I might not be able to build in any of the three areas, I suspect I know what the issue is. So I'm going to proceed with the next step, which is going to be building up my walls and focusing on that before I work on any extensions. While I'm working on this, I do want to say, if you'd like to see us build this in real time in a multiplayer setting, I'm going to drop a link down at the bottom of the screen right there. There's also going to be a link in the description. It's a fun way to interact with us live. And looking at this really confirms my suspicions on what or who may be in our way when it comes to completing extensions or sections of this side of the frame. Now that we've gotten him out of the way, we should be able to build our wall and more than likely the frame that I'd like to put on the side as well. And this really confirms that. So now that it's went from red to yellow, I know that all I have to do is clear all this brush out of the way. And don't worry, we'll be using these palm leaves for something in the future. Spoiler alert. So we're not needlessly hacking down fauna, or I should say flora, in the jungle. It looks like we have one more piece of flora in the way, and that's this tobacco leaf, and I'm sure we'll find a use for this as well. Now we should be able to confidently put our frame up. We just have to wait for the tobacco to fade away. And yep, there we go. We're ready to go. Now instead of completing it, I'm going to take care of as much at one time as possible. So I'm going to start working on the mud walls for the first floor. And then we will move on to the next step. It not allowing me to put a roof on top is nothing unusual. We are going to complete what we have right now. Look at that, doesn't that look nice? And now that we have that completed, we should be able to put our notch roof up. And I'm going to move it over just a little bit like so, because I'd like to put a ladder there and I don't want it to be too close to the entrance so that it won't get in the way. Over here, instead of using a mud roof, I'm going to go with a more colorful palm roof. That gives us an opportunity to use the palm leaves and to add a little bit of color to this. And you'll see why it's going to kind of match something else in the not too distant future. The next step involves adding the second floor frame. And of course, speaking of color, I'm going to go with the slightly more colorful bamboo ladder. Reason number 979, I love this game. Look at that beautiful view. Look at the sun coming down. It is coming down kind of hard, though. It can work both ways. And don't worry, once we get to the conclusion of this build, I'm going to show you exactly how to alleviate that. One thing you'll notice with this build in particular, since it's mainly a vertical build, you really have to, when you're placing blueprints from the bottom floor, you really have to approach it from the right angle. Now that we've gotten the walls taken care of, we can start to add our mud. And while I'm placing these blueprints down, I can already sense there might be an issue with placing the mud roof for a couple different reasons. Number one, it's pretty close quarters in here, and number two, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find the right angle to place it, really from any angle, but I'm going to give it a shot. But before we do that, I just want to show you there's not really much room of anything. Speaking of close quarters, this level is mainly for looking out the window in a lookout fashion, looking for trouble. Down here is where we're going to be placing our living area, I guess you could say. And as you can see, I am struggling to find the right angle to place the roof. Not entirely surprising. And trying to place it from the outside is definitely a long shot. And there is a second problem. We cannot place a ladder to go to the third floor. So we may have to take some drastic measures here. I'm going to give it one final shot, just from halfway down the ladder, to see if that makes a difference. It doesn't, but that's okay. Don't be afraid to take down a portion of your structure in order to either change your strategy or just to approach it from a different angle. And first, we're going to approach it from a different angle, or I guess a better way to describe it would be in a different build order. And I'm just going to move these puppies out of the way so that we've got a little bit more room to build, and we'll use those long sticks for a different project. First, I'm going to place our ladder, and it allows me to do so. Next, I am going to place the wood wall, and it's not allowing me to. That's okay. I'm going to proceed as normal. And I'm going to drop a mud roof on top, which it allows me to do, and I'm going to complete these two actions. And then I'm going to try the wooden wall again, and it allows me to. Fantastic. Now, it should allow me to put a mud wall down, and it does, and now we can move on with our build. Now that we've gotten our base tower down, we can have a little fun with this. First, let's start with our wooden frame. Drop that down and complete it. And next, we're going to proceed with our balconies. This is what makes it look, I don't know, it just adds a little pizzazz to it, but at the same time, it's not just form, it's also function, because it's going to keep that pesky yet beautiful sun out of our eyes. Earlier, I'd mentioned a little palm roof coordination with the bottom floor, and that's exactly what we're going to do up here. And earlier, I had talked about angles and being able to complete the roof. This is a great example of being able to complete it, because if you approach it from the right angle and you look down, you may not be able to see that it is a set blueprint, but look at that, it is. And then you can proceed with completion of this portion of the build. But what joy of megabase building wouldn't be complete without a look away complete fade? And there we have it. Isn't that nice? Gosh, I love the way that looks. Now that we've gotten our base tower down, it's important to place certain tools that are going to help us stay here more long term. And what I always recommend, instead of putting a blueprint down for one part and then completing it and moving on to the next, when it comes to beds, you want to do both blueprints at the same time. And here's why. Depending upon how flat the area is and what angles the terrain is giving you, you may want to put down your bed first and then work your campfire around it. It's just a nice little tiny tidbit of advice. The last thing you want to do, especially considering how much resources the campfire takes, the last thing you want to do is build that and then realize you can't put a bed down. But there we go. Now we've got both in this nice little cozy area. And speaking of cozy, let's go ahead and add a little ambiance to this build with a nice little fire in our campfire. And of course, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way. Which, according to Jake, means a lot of sweat and swearing. Well, folks, not only do I hope you enjoyed this build as much as me, but if you do decide to build it, I hope you get as much utility and joy out of it as we do. With that out of the way, I'd like to wish you happy building, safe building, and many blessings. Thank you so much for watching, folks. Take care.